Welcome to our first In Conversation with Joanna Murray-Smith, facilitated by Melanie Tait. For this panel, very special, we're going to be beginning and ending with short readings from Joanna's acclaimed play, Julia, which is currently on its second national tour at the moment, which is very exciting. So, without further ado, here is Katrina Foster reading from Julia.
The 1980s. Everything is big. Hair is happening. In the US, Geraldine Ferraro becomes the first woman to be nominated as vice president by a major party. The first PCs bring the future home. For the first time, our countrymen reach the top of Everest. Ambition is more than acceptable. It's admirable. Trump's The Art of the Deal hits the bestseller list along with the G-Spot. Pat Cash and Yvonne Goolagong win Wimbledon. Kylie and Danny cover Annie Lennox's Sisters Are Doing It for Themselves on Young Talent Time. Kay Cotty becomes the first woman sailor to solo circumnavigate the world non-stop. MTV rises up and the Berlin Wall comes down. Fashion is never, ever going to be as good again. Feminism enters the 80s a rebel, giving the finger to mainstream establishment, and finishes the decade firmly established as a guiding light to a better world. And what's better than a smart, good-looking redhead? A smart, good-looking redhead who wants things for herself. I want to change the world. I really do. But I am also just hot. We're alive with the thrill of battle. We're driving around in old Chryslers, buying our clothes at disposal stores, an army of camouflaged 20-somethings who know deep in their strong bones that rage is sexy. Charged! Our parents aren't dead, but they might as well be. The Pet Shop Boys are singing West End Girls, and they're in the suburbs drinking tea and making ironic comments about reinventing the wheel. But fuck it, this time the wheel is different. It's our wheel. No tertiary fees, no multinationals, no uranium, no damming the Franklin River, and a big fucking yes to sex. The Guerrilla Girls are tackling the art world. Naomi Wolf's The Beauty Myth is ready to launch. The first woman, Sandra Day O'Connor, is nominated to the Supreme Court. Sally Ride becomes the first woman in space, defying the gravity of centuries of sexual politics. And me too. I will defy gravity. I'm acing a law degree, but I'm not going to be an anonymous feminist lawyer in a city office. I'm not going to be a man only in pantyhose and pumps. I'm going to be bigger. I can do anything. I can run the Australian Union of Students. I can make deadlines, lobby, seduce, collaborate, manage a budget, and excel at logistics. I can galvanise those with barely a heartbeat. I can fight, I can recruit, I can imagine. I can work in corporate law and talk the talk and command the room and make money. I can win a place in the House of Representatives. I can give a maiden speech to Parliament. I'm here for something. I'm alive for something. I'm destined for something bigger. Right? I mean, I could. Well, I could, couldn't I? I don't like it when all eyes turn towards me. It's not me that matters. It's not this. It's the shape of ideas. It's when the ideas hit the air. It's when they're made real by being heard. It's the moment of persuasion. What I really like is being in the messy moment, the prism of perspectives and ideologies all firing against one another, and I just sneak in there with the perfect compromise because I've learned a few things that I can't unlearn, truths that are the oxygen of a political life. Idealism without strategy is just a figment. I can jettison what I truly want for what is achievable. I want the best, but I'll take better. Compromise can sometimes be heroic. I'm a negotiator. I know you're thinking a negotiator. Not exactly passionate, is it? Oh, but it is. That perfect place where pragmatism gets lift off from tiny little wings of idealism. That's the moment I am most alive. And for that, I'll stand in the light if I have to, and I'll be luminous. I will shine my Father's light. It will become my light. I will shine for the two of us.
Hello.
Do you mind if I sit here?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that stunning reading. That was so good. We know who to call when Justine gets sick.
That's Katrina Foster, and please welcome Joanna Murray-Smith. Did you have an introduction before on... I mean, we know Joanna, don't we? So I will give a tiny little contemporary introduction. Is that all right, Joanna? Hello, I'm Melanie Tait, and Joanna Murray-Smith is here with us. She's a truly national and international career as a playwright and a screenwriter, and I suspect many of us in this room might be happy with a fraction of just that. In Sydney alone over the last year, we've seen the revival of Switzerland and an adaptation of Uncle Vanya at Ensemble Theatre. And tonight, her relationship with Patricia Highsmith continues as her adaptation of The Talented Mr. Ripley opens at STC. And Julia, of course, is on a really celebrated national tour at the moment. Oh, and I read as well that Helen Mirren's attached to Be in Switzerland, a film adaptation of...
She's done it.
It's done. It's done.
Yeah,
oh, well, we're going to have to talk about that. Do you mind if let's go, we'll forget about the introduction then and just go straight to the questions, I think. And what we're going to do is have a conversation here, and then towards the end, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask your questions. Just up here, there will be a little thing that you can take a photo on and ask a question there, and we'll get to those probably about 15-20 minutes towards the end of our conversation. Let's get on with it. Joanna, I know this is a really, this is sort of, might seem like a bit of a basic question to start in front of a bunch of playwrights, but I'm really interested to know what theatre was to you as a child. Were you taken to the theatre as a child?
Yes, I was. I was very lucky. In fact, I feel guilty when I talk to writing students, because I think there's no kind of other way to gather your confidence as a writer like having parents who believed in the joy of the arts. You know, my parents were their whole lives were dedicated to the arts. My father was a literary editor and a historian. My mother was an English teacher, and the house was, really, it was one big party all the time of sort of interesting people talking about the world and drinking. And so that was the sort of milieu that I was growing up in. And, when I said to my parents that I was going to be a writer when I was 8, there was no, well, yes, that's wonderful, darling, but you need to qualify as a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. It was just like, of course you are. Like, why wouldn't you? So I think that expectation that was sort of normal gave me a huge head start. But it was also just that sense that the greatest thing to aspire to was to tell stories well, that's what everybody wants to do, was the sort of feeling in the house. And part of that involved taking me to the theatre, and my father being an academic, we lived in London at various points, and, I saw Midsummer Night's Dream in Regent's Park, and, the fairies coming out of the trees, and Bottom, walking through with the roar of the lions of the Regent's Park Zoo happening, and it was just this sense of the absolute exhilaration of being able to hold people in a spell for 90 minutes or 100 minutes and just keep them there and tell your story well enough that they don't want to leave. And really, I can honestly say that ambition started when I was about 8. And it was, from being taken to the theatre and being read stories. I mean, I often say that one of the best ways to learn about structure when you're writing plays is to read short stories. Because in a short story, you have to have the same structural engineering as you have to have in a play. You have to have a quick introduction. You have to deep dive into a story. And then you have to have an ending which feels, as they say, surprising and inevitable at the same time. And a really great short story does that. My father used to read to me Henry Lawson short stories when I was a little girl, and he read them to me every night. And even though they seem kind of quaint now and old-fashioned, they're actually so unbelievably brilliantly structured and so sort of underplayed that, I think they really kind of were a huge part of my education as a playwright.
So as an 8-year-old announcing that you're going to be a writer, it was a playwright that you meant?
No, not at all. I've never wanted to be a playwright.
Right.
I still don't want to be a playwright. No, I mean, especially not, there's no time to be more definitive about that than on the afternoon of an opening night. There's got to be an easier way to make a living than this. So no, I never wanted to be a playwright. I completely fell into it. I mean, looking back now, I'm old enough to be able to see that there was a kind of inevitability to it, which I never saw before. I could never work out why it was I'd ended up as a playwright. But, and I've told this story before, and I hope I'm not boring anyone, but every summer of my life I've spent on this uninhabited island with my family and a couple of other families, and there's a little cabin, and the cabin has no doors. It's about the size of sort of 2 caravans. It's really small, and it has no doors. So I would go to sleep to the sounds of my parents and their friends arguing, all night. Sometimes they'd argue all night about usually politics and but also, artistic issues. And I would lie in bed and listening to the voices in that room, even though I didn't understand the content of what they were talking about, I could absorb how the power in the argument shifted from one voice to the other. And I could lie there and think, oh, Dad's winning. No, Max is winning. Oh, no, Mum's winning, And there was this sort of sense of how the words invested you with kind of power, and it was transitory and it was exciting, and you never knew when the power was going to be taken away from you, from someone, with the power of someone else's words. And all of that, of course, now when I look back, I think, well, that was my training, really.
How then, for not wanting to go into writing plays, how did you get kicked off? Like, what was it that brought you into the world? And
I was doing an arts degree at Melbourne University, not very well, and I was absolutely coming alive with the extracurricular aspects of university life, which is so much harder to do now. But Farrago, the university newspaper at Melbourne Uni, and all of my friends really at university were actors, and they were all putting on student theatre. And I used to go and see the productions, and they'd be Chekhov and Arabelle and all sorts of incredible writers, and I'd think, oh, I can do better than that. As a 20-year-old, and so I had the nerve to try, I guess, or the ego, whatever you want to call it, foolishness. And so my best friend at the time was this guy called Ray Gill, and I said to Ray, let's write a play, and we wrote this play together called Ghost Trans, which was then directed by an absolutely incredible woman called Eva Chayor, who was running student theatre at Melbourne University then, and sort of just terribly was murdered a couple of years after that. And she would have changed. I totally believe she would have sort of changed the face of Australian theatre. She was incredible. And she put the play on. It was a huge success. And I think we just sort of went, okay, what have I learned from this experience? I've learned that it's fun. I've learned that I never ever want to collaborate again with Ray or anybody else. I think I can do this. And then, that set the ball rolling. That play was one of the earliest plays to be picked up and taken to an independent theatre off campus, which was a little theatre in Fitzroy. And that felt like Broadway. I mean, even when I was on Broadway, it never felt quite as extraordinary as that first play got moving off campus into Fitzroy. Even though it was really my mum and all her friends who came. And then I wrote a play about my university thesis, The Angry Penguins, the Bohemians of Melbourne in the 40s, and that play got me sort of recognised really in the mainstream press. And then Playbox picked me up. And Playbox said to me, I did my early play with them called Atlanta, which was not a success on anyone's terms. And they said, I wept and cried and said, I'm so sorry, and you've invested so much in me, and you've invested so much in this play, and I've let you down. And they said something which very few playwrights, young playwrights would hear nowadays, which is, where we believe in you for the long term.
Wow.
We don't care whether you fail and fail and fail. We know you're a writer, we know you're a playwright, and we're going to be behind you. And that was a good luck story. Yeah.
So when you have, to have what you perceive as a failure early on, and then to have that faith put in you, what did that do? What did that do for your further creativity? What did it do in terms of deciding on what you were going to write about? And
it was not really what I was going to write about. I don't seem to have. Well, perhaps shouldn't say this aloud, especially not when there's no wood anywhere visible. But I don't seem to have problems with content. I think if you're alive to the world and you're curious about people and you are excited by life, content kind of does come to you. There's a part of your brain which is always open to stories. But the really hard part is the emotional stamina. That was what I struggled with, and it was there's no way around it. It was incredibly hard. I mean, I think I sort of had a nervous breakdown after Honor was on Broadway, and I came back and I said, I can't do this anymore. It's just killing me, and I can't. I know it's pathetic, but I actually can't stand the criticism. I can't cope with the criticism. I can't process it. I can't absorb it and take what's useful from it, not because I'm defensive, but because I don't know who to trust. I don't know what to trust. And also, I think the likelihood is that I'm not good enough. And that was the hardest thing to get over. But what I found was that I came back from New York after this sort of magical mystery tour, and the experience on Broadway was fantastic until, the reality hit that it wasn't going to run for 3 years. I said, I'll never write again, and within 3 weeks I started the next play. And this has been the feature of my life, is it doesn't matter how low I get, or how broken I am from an experience, or how much self-doubt I have, there's something in me that just can't bear not to write.
I want to get back to the moving on and from, that devastation in a moment, because I think it's something that all writers deal with constantly. In the lead up to the opening of a play, I always feel like at the, your skin breaks out and you put on weight or you lose weight or you do, all the things, you just are beside yourself and a horrible person to be around. And to sustain such a career as yours while still dealing with those things, I find amazing. I want to go to that in a moment. But if we could just pop back for 1 second. You went to New York to do the Columbia Playwriting MFA. Or MFA? No.
No, actually it wasn't. It was a year in the writing program. Right. And so I could do, it wasn't a degree. It was just, I could do whatever I felt like doing. So it was a year of play, really.
Yep.
So I worked across different forms, and I had incredible teachers in each one.
What did you get out of that experience?
Well, A lot of things. I mean, first of all, I was in New York. I was also going through this incredibly dynamic period because I had a 3-month-old baby, the first one, and who my husband was kind of caring for while I was at class.
Another collaboration with Ray.
Yes, well, a much
all.
more beautiful collaboration than anything we would have come up with on the page, and much more fun creating. But he, and I would sort of race back and breastfeed and then race back to Columbia for the next class. And so it was incredibly stimulating. But, and as well as that, I'd never really had any writing teachers. I never studied writing. So I was kind of fascinated by that because, there's always that thought, you can't really teach someone to write. Well, no, you can't. I don't think you can teach someone to be a writer, but I think you can teach someone to be a better writer. And I was definitely becoming a better writer, and I think I was just so stimulated. So that's where I wrote Honour. So I'd come to New York with a commission, and I wrote the play while I was doing that program. And the other thing I learnt was that in each class we were sitting around a table with probably maybe 20 other students, and they were from all walks. They were, young Black Americans there who were coming from the wrong side of town and had experiences that were completely different to a nice white middle-class girl from Mount Eliza in Australia. There were, Scandinavians. There were, amazing writers from Japan. There were like all sorts of preppy New Yorkers. And it didn't sort of matter that we were all from different cultural backgrounds. We were all facing exactly the same problems. And that was really fascinating to me. For the first time, I understood there was a kind of camaraderie of creativity, which is about facing that it didn't really matter that our styles were completely different. What mattered was that, it's not very complicated really what the challenge is. The challenge is that you bring people into a room and you hold them there in a spell. And we were all facing that regardless of the kinds of plays we wanted to write and the ways that we wanted to go about writing them. And I found that very reassuring and very interesting. And it also helped me narrow down what really makes a great play. And even now, the things I learned at Columbia, one of them was that, to me, I very rarely have a good experience at the theatre if there isn't some humour involved. The darker the subject, the more important the humour. That was one thing. The other thing is that really all plays, it doesn't matter what they're about, are about suspense. That you have to hold the audience in suspense, enough for them to want to know what happens. Enough for them not to be thinking about whether their car park was legal, how much they're going to have to pay the babysitter when they get home, whatever it is. You have to hold them in suspense, even if it's a romantic comedy. We all know that feeling when you want to know what happens. And if you don't have that feeling, then your play isn't going to work. So, it's a very simple rule. I find it a very useful rule because when I'm watching my own play, for instance, during previews of Ripley, I'm sitting there and I'm sitting in a scene and the air comes out of the scene and I'm thinking, if I wasn't connected to this play, my mind would be drifting in this moment.
Right. It's a scary moment, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you come out and you grab the director and you say, I don't care what you do, but you have to fix this. I haven't seen it until now. I'm so sorry.
Can we talk about, when you mentioned Honour there, and Honour was your play from that time, what has that play meant to you in your career?
Well, Honour has probably only very recently been eclipsed as my most produced play. That really bothered me for a long time. Instead of feeling grateful that the play endured, I do feel that gratitude, and Red Stitch did a great production of it in Melbourne this year. So I was, really delighted that audiences were still really enjoying the play this time on. You know, it's a story of when a man leaves his wife for a younger woman, and of course, when I was writing the play, I identified with the younger woman, and now I identify with a wife, although I am still married to Ray, I should add. But that's how long the play has been with me. But I think the endurance of that play taught me that my instinct to keep the plays very emotionally primal, that I never wanted to get too far into realism that you were distracted from the very, very elemental emotional aspects of the play. That this was a play about passion, it was about loss, it was about fear of mortality, it was about loneliness. It was about these very, very fundamental human predicaments and preoccupations and motivations. And there's something about the elemental nature of honour. It's not connected to a place. That's why it's been done all over the world. And I've more or less stuck to that with almost every play. It's not really located anywhere. Very few of them are. I mean, you know, Switzerland is, and Berlin is, but not very many other plays are. And that's because my main fixation is on the idea that, you know, we have a shared humanity wherever we come from. And if you take this play to Tokyo or you take this play to Mexico City, the human beings watching it have all identified with those emotions at some point in their life, and that is a way in, for me, to bring the audience into the world of the play.
I'd like to just go back to the first session of the morning about the international playwright, and I'd love to know, you know, Honour has these famed international productions that I feel like when I was researching you to talk today, every feature about you mentions certain actors, certain productions of Honour. And I wonder whether what your feeling is about that international sort of approbation, I guess, what that means for a career back in Australia. Like, does that approval, that kind of international aspect of having that work done overseas by these esteemed players, does that bring something back to Australia for the longevity of your career? Does that...
Yes. I mean, we all know about the cultural cringe.
Yeah.
But it's also, I mean, yes, cultural cringe in a sense that Australians definitely still feel like the seal of approval from England or America in particular is a big value add to someone. But it's also just the awareness that you just have to jump through more hoops to get that kind of exposure. And so your play is being chosen from a bigger pool, which inevitably adds status to it. Mm-hmm. And it adds status to it in your own mind as well. I mean, I immodestly always wanted the plays to move beyond these borders. Yeah. And, also what you learn from seeing the plays in different places has made me a much better writer.
Right. Can we talk a bit about your process of writing plays? Because the subject matters of across the breadth of your plays are really varied and all sorts of different things you choose to write about. Can we go to sort of the beginning of an idea for you? What does an idea need to do to sort of grasp you and commit your life to working on to that eventual moment that we're talking about, where tonight you have an opening? What does an idea have to do to get you to commit to it to begin with?
I don't know, but I do know that it comes fully encompassed by the sense of a realised play. I can have an idea and it can sort of intrigue me and it not ignite. And then an idea will come to me and I'll go, in an instant, I know that that's a play. And I don't know that I've ever really broken it down. I mean, occasionally it's an image, I can see an image very, very clearly. So with my play, The Gift, which was a play about a young artistic couple who realise that they are more in love with their creativity than they are with their child. And so they meet an older couple who were never able to have children on a holiday that they've won at a resort, and they want to give their child to this older couple because they realise that they kind of their deepest instincts are really much more sort of selfish and egocentric, which, you know, you don't have to call Dr. Freud to see where that play came from. But that play came to me with an image of a little girl in a glass box, sort of whose life was, we were looking in at her and her life and her future and her, you know, what was it like to be the child of someone whose feelings of artistic exhilaration was so much more forceful than their sense of exhilaration as a parent. So that was one which very clearly began with an image, and actually a play which I've just written was the first play I've ever written just for fun. Right. I wrote it because I just wanted to write it. I'm madly trying to talk the Sydney Theatre Company into doing it. We'll see what happens. But that started with an image of a crumbling mansion on Sydney Harbour. So yeah, sometimes it's an image, but I guess what you have to feel is, you know, that whole idea of an internal combustible conflict is I guess the closest that you would get to being able to narrow it down. So that often comes as a moral quandary. So in The Gift it was, can you ever forgive parents for not wanting to be parents? Or is it legitimate to own up to the fact that you love something else as much as you love your child, or love something more? I don't know the answer to that, and I almost never know the answer to the moral quandaries that I raise, and that's the way I like it, because I really want to prompt the question. I don't want to provide the answer for the audience. But within that moral quandary, you could hear two, at least, opposing voices fighting for the truth. And I guess if that comes to me with a shred of a thought, flicker of a thought, then I know I've got a play.
And you said before that you've written your fun play and you're trying to get STC to do it. Is that the way you work? Do you write the play and then take it around, or do you pitch for commission? And
No, I've been, well, I guess in a way I pitch for a commission. I mean, for a long time, I have been lucky enough to have theatre companies backing me, and I've made them lots of money. So let's be honest here. That helps.
yeah,
So they have been interested in what I want to do next. That hasn't been consistent all the way through. It depends on the artistic director. There's always a wave of panic when the new artistic director comes in, or I think maybe they're one of those people that really just hates my work and doesn't want to be a part of it, or, you know, thinks I'm too big for my boots or whatever, overrated. But generally speaking, despite a few difficult years when I had young children, the ball has kept rolling with theatre companies being interested. So I've been able to go to them and say, I've got this play idea, and they've said, yes, we want to commission that. In the last few years, it's been the companies coming to me and saying, we would like to commission you, are you interested? So that happened with both Julia and The Talented Mr. Ripley. And that's kind of unusual, but it's getting less unusual because theatre companies are, this is the reality, is that since COVID, everyone is struggling. They're not back. And they feel like they need an extra little hook. It's not enough that it's a play written by me. They want to have a play that's either, in the case of Ripley, a well-known property where the kind of zing of the idea is, how do you bring something that most people know in prose or from the screen onto the stage? a big story. Ripley is a big story in every way. It's got 17 locations, and it's a profound story about our sociopathic tendencies as human beings and morality. There's that where they go, oh, everyone's going to be interested in how you do the talented Miss Ripley on stage. So that's really less about me. And then Julia kept saying, we really want a play from you. It had been a long time since SCC had a play by me, and we want you to write on something Australian. And I said, well, that's not really the way I work. And then Kip said, we want you to write a play about Julia Gillard, or I'd love it if you wanted to write a play about Julia Gillard. And I said, I really, really don't want to write a play about Julia Gillard. Virtually can't think of a subject I would less want to write a play about. But I'll be polite and I'll go and read everything I can about Julia Gillard, and then I'll come back to you. And I read everything that I could. And the really fascinating thing was that, and the thing that hooked me and turned me completely around, was not just being more aware of what an extraordinary person she is, which she is in a lot of kind of mysterious ways, but it was really more that nothing that's been written about her, including her own memoir, tells you anything about what's going on inside her head. And so what that did was it left a huge amount of room for me if I had leave to speculate. So it's quite an odd thing to write about someone who's still alive. It was fine me writing about Patricia Highsmith in Switzerland because she was dead. But writing about someone who's alive has a different set of responsibilities, obviously. And so I then wrote to her and said, I'm really happy not to write this play. It's absolutely fine if you don't want me to, but I absolutely need your blessing if I am going to write it. I really genuinely felt that was kind of a moral requirement because she'd been through so much. Her people came back to me and said, look, she won't endorse it. And I didn't want her endorsement. I absolutely didn't want her endorsement because I wanted it to be politically independent in a way. But she's completely happy for you to do whatever you want to do. So from that moment on, I was electrified.
That's a gift, isn't it? Wow. On the development of Julia, but also your other works and the various relationships you've had over the years with companies, and like you said, those companies changing with artistic directors and the like. I'm trying to find a way. What does your work need to be developed in a way that you feel comfortable? Who has that relationship been with over the years that you've enjoyed making work with the most?
I've had so many fantastic relationships. It's really a struggle to think of any relationship I haven't enjoyed in creating plays. There's something about, I really think you choose your director very, very carefully, and then after that, it's their production. And I really do feel that. Of course, I try to persuade them, but generally speaking, I found that if you choose the right director, you're almost always in accord. You have the conversation early on with them and make sure they're seeing the play the way that you see it, and they see the story the way that you've written it. But then let them find their own way into it. And so I like working with people who are really not facilitators of my work. I like working with people who are visionaries in their own medium. And Sarah Goods, early on Ariette Taylor, and then more recently Sarah Goods, Simon Phillips, I had that relationship with. There was a real sense that they were not just bringing my work to the stage, but they were bringing their work to the stage as well. And I still marvel when I'm sitting in the theatre watching Ripley, as I have every night this week, I am absolutely astonished at how Sarah has lifted those words up and brought them into 3 dimensions. And it sounds so corny, but that collaboration, when it works And sometimes it doesn't work, but when it works, it's such an amazing kind of mingling of different ways of seeing the world. And in Ripley, you know, Steve Francis, who's done the music, he's done the music for a few of my shows. I think he's, you know, absolutely incredible artist. I mean, I can't believe he's sort of not world famous. You know, he's just an astonishing sound designer for theatre, where he can take a story and he can see how you make it deeper, how you make it truer, how you make it more exciting, how you make it more vibrant through sound. And if you've got that with a lighting designer, and you've got it with a production designer, and you've got it with the director, and then you've got a good cast, you know, it's there's no better life than that when it works. Sometimes you have all of those things and it still doesn't work.
I was going to ask if you'd like to share when it doesn't work, but maybe not. But, I mean, that's up to you. But and what doesn't work?
Well, I mean, when I think of productions that haven't worked, they've been mainly where it's a weird thing to say, but actually what's killed the production has been the production design.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Design, it took me a long time to work it out, but, you know, design doesn't just work to make your play better. It can sometimes work to sabotage it. And I've had a few experiences like that, where the design was too conceptual, it was fighting the actors. You know, the actors literally couldn't move around the stage easily, so they were constantly feeling self-conscious about where they were sitting or walking or standing. Designs which have been too declarative, I'm really clever production designer, instead of serving the world of the play. So, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I don't think he'd mind me saying that, you know, Michael Scott Mitchell did one of the designs I liked least in my career, which was for a production of Honour way back that the ensemble did, but it was actually at the Wharf. And it was very high concept and I really didn't like it. And then, and I was a bit scarred by it. And when Kate Blanchett and Andrew Upton commissioned took Switzerland, actually being commissioned in Los Angeles, and were doing it at the Sydney Theatre Company as the first production, they said, because they have to consult you on all the important designers and the cast, and they said, you know, how do you feel about designers? Is there anyone you'd like to work with? And I said, well, the only designer I'm a little bit scarred by is Michael Scott Mitchell, because he did this production once in your building that I really didn't like. And I was overseas and I got back and they had someone in the company had forgotten to email me to get my consent to the designer. And I got back and it was already on the posters and things, Michael Scott Mitchell designing Switzerland. It was just so uncanny. I was like, and it was so fantastic having Kate Blanchett grovelling. Like, can you imagine? It's worth anything. You know, we're so sorry we didn't get the permission from you. But he then designed the best set of my working life. So it just goes to show, you know. The set for Switzerland is my all-time favourite set. And he's incredible, you know, designer. So there you go.
Are you ever able to... We'll go to questions in a moment, but I want to ask you, because you talked about how the play becomes the directors. Are you ever able, though, to completely let a work go? Or are you even sitting in an audience watching Honour this year thinking, ooh, I'd like to do, you know, tighten this line up or change this line? Or,
no, from that point of view, I'm rewriting every time I see a play. And every time I see a play from the past, I'm thinking, oh my God, I would have written this so differently now. That's not just that story. That's you know, autobiographical statement of who I was at that time. And I find that really hard. I'm never happy with anything. And I never feel as if the play is done. That's why I don't reread them, because unless I have to, because I'm too frightened of that feeling. I'm too frightened of the feeling that back in 1997 I let myself down by not being a good enough writer. And, I still have that feeling. I'm watching every preview. This is after 5 weeks of rehearsal. And I'm thinking, I cannot believe it's not until now that I've realised that speech has no business being in the play. And it's a torture. It's a torture.
We're going to go to questions in a moment. I think if you'd like to ask Joanna a question, go to the QR code there and ask it. Oh, and we've got one here. Do you have strategies to get yourself out of the emotional slumps that you mentioned? What a great question.
Yes. Pregnancy. Right. It's very hard to kind of stay focused on your career if you've got children. And my children did me a huge favour by making me understand that the world was so much more than my life as a playwright. I mean, really, genuinely. It was an unbearable feeling before I had children, where I felt like my entire assessment of myself was really whether I was a good enough writer or not. And it was a terrible feeling, and I think it's probably doesn't matter what the profession is. If that's all you have, you're neglecting very important parts of yourself. I wasn't a good friend. I don't think I was a particularly nice person, actually, when I was young, and so ambitious not ambitious for fame and glory. There was a bit of that, but it was really more ambitious to be better as a writer. And my father was a literary editor, so I was constantly seeing him slashing, redlining things, and seeing the effect of really good editing on a piece of work. And I knew that it didn't matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shortcut that process. I would learn to be a good self-editor, but I didn't have it yet, and therefore the plays were flawed. I think it was a real relief having children, because there was a part of me which said, it's only a play. And I'd never thought that before then. The play was everything. In fact, the other night, Justine and I were texting late at night. She's up in Brisbane doing Julia. And, she said, how are previews going for Ripley? And I say, it's so hard to remember, Justine, that it's not the future of civilization that hangs on tonight's, show. It's just a play. And she texted back, well, it is and it isn't. And I thought that was really true, because you do feel as if, and it reminds me of my younger self when I'm sitting there thinking that, and then I have to sometimes consciously pull myself back and go, you will survive this.
What is it? Sorry, I will get to the next question, but I just want to ask, I will survive what? Is it anxiety that comes along with how an audience will respond? Is it anxiety along the line of critics? Is it what is it that?
Yeah, I mean, what makes you feel as if you failed? When I was younger, it was definitely the critics. The critics mattered more then, though, because you didn't have the blogosphere. So there were kind of a few people who had to like it. And kind of the wonderful thing about the internet and the fact that people had, all these ways, and now have even more ways of expressing their opinion, and the sort of democratisation of criticism, with Substack and, Reddit and blogs and posts and this, that, the other, is that it has diminished the power of the big critic, which was certainly an aspect of my early life. Ben Brantley in the New York Times was everything about the future of a show. And he kind of gave me a middling review all those years back. It wasn't a slam at all, but it certainly, it was my least successful production of Honour on Broadway, and it was a huge hit in London. So, it was, who knew? But at the time, I felt like he sees me better than I see myself. So yeah, then it was that. Now I'm pretty, attuned to the audience. The audience has taught me everything about playwriting, everything. It's going in and watching night after night, show after show, and seeing the difference between the matinee and the evening show, and what was different on stage when they're saying the same lines of dialogue under the same lighting cues. What are those tiny, tiny details that made the matinee so fantastic and the evening so sluggish or, ordinary? And so I guess if I'm feeling vulnerable through the behaviour of the audience, they're not laughing, or they're not, in the case of Ripley, it's not gauging by laughter as he plunges in the knife. I am watching the audience, and, the great thing this week, I've got lots of doubt going on in my head at the moment. There are lots of things that are wearing away at me. I'm worried about, the person who was sitting next to me. I'm worried about the show broke down on Wednesday night and stopped for 5 minutes and 2 people left, and that nearly killed me. I was awake all night because those 2 people left.
Of course you were.
Yeah.
Didn't they know that when they left?
I know. And then, someone will say something to you and you'll go, oh my God, it's like really, like last night, it was like the audience was like this for 2 hours. They were just like absolutely caught up in what was going on the stage, and you can feel it. I mean, any playwright can feel the difference between a great performance and an okay performance. It's just something in the room. There's some magic or there isn't,
It keeps you coming back, doesn't it? It's kind of like that. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Chris who says, is there one unifying theme or idea which runs through all your plays? And what do you want your plays to change?
What do I want the plays to change? The only thing I really want them to change is to encourage more people to come to the theatre. It's literally that, is just people saying, like as with Julia, a lot of people said, I'm coming back, and they did come back with their children and their grandchildren, particularly women bringing women. So that was like a really gratifying practical thing. I love seeing the plays succeed for the actors. I love seeing it drum up work. I love being part of an industry and being part of the success of that industry in Australia. But I don't really have ambitions for them changing something internal for people. I want them to be, there's a word that's kind of been a little bit frowned upon in theatre companies or in the sort of culture, which is entertainment. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. Let audiences feel that they're getting bang for their buck, that they've been transported out of themselves and into themselves at the same time for just 90 minutes. Just give them that for the $100 or $140 that they're forking out, plus car parking, plus babysitting, and I really want the audience to have a good time, and that's kind of, and then come back for more, not just my plays, but plays in general. So that's the only way I really want to change people. Or sometimes I want them to doubt themselves. I mean, with Julia, I think it would be great if people felt a bit like me, which was not really interested in Julia Gillard, and feel changed and recognise. I felt really ashamed of myself when I was writing Julia, that at the time I hadn't paid more attention to what she was going through. Yes, I sort of said, oh, isn't it terrible, the media is so nasty? But I didn't understand what this woman was doing. She was passing more legislation than any other Prime Minister in history under that kind of vitriol and stress. Utterly disgusting, the way she was treated. Doesn't matter what side of politics she was on. The way she was treated as a human being said something absolutely terrible, damning about our national culture at that time. So yes, I guess there was a kind of political desire for change there, but not party political. It's really more being aware of the human dimensions of public figures, that everybody's a human being. And in terms of common themes, well, I, of course, believe most of my working life that every play was utterly and completely different. And in a way, you look at the sort of subject matter and you go, well, yeah, they are kind of all, I've been lucky enough to be able to write comedies. I've been written on quite serious things. I've written now sort of kind of overtly political plays. I think all of my plays are political in one way or another through that kind of question of some kind of moral dimension. But the older I get, the more I realise that there are preoccupations that won't let me go and that will just reappear even when I am intent upon not recreating them. They will appear somehow. I'm very drawn to the relationship between mothers and daughters. I'm very drawn, particularly drawn to the idea of sort of ideology, hardline ideologies, and what happens when those ideologies come up against human dimensions, human foibles. And I think, that obviously came from my early life with my parents, who were in their younger years before I was born, communists, serious communists. They worked for the Communist Party in, Mum was a spy in Czechoslovakia for the Communist Party between 1948 and 1950. Then they had a huge falling when they realised that, what Stalin really was. When Russia invaded Hungary in 1956, they left the party and were incredibly, I think, probably humiliated and embarrassed and sad and upset at how blinkered they'd been. Although they stayed, broadly speaking, on the left. They were very distrustful of any hardline ideologies, anything that's argued too forcefully and doesn't take into account, the humanity of people. So, the female of the species was really having fun at the expense of hardline feminism. I got into a lot of trouble for it, but I don't care. I get to say what I think, that's the fun of it. That does crop up again and again. And I think also I was given a very hard time for writing middle-class characters in my early life. There was a real sort of critique of me not writing about, Daniel Keane territory, the people who were struggling. I'm sure there were a few nights there where I said, I wish I was Daniel Keane. I wish I was Daniel Keane. I wish I could write those voices. But of course, I was writing what I knew, which were largely educated, middle-class, kind of privileged people. But what was so fascinating to me about that world was that they've got the most to lose. They're the ones who are the middle class is most propped up by where they send their kids or what car they drive or what suburb they live in or, those sort of things, so that when things go wrong, as things do in life, inevitably, you come back to this very, very frail, eggshell of a human inside all of this prestige and good fortune. And there's something about seeing that good fortune unravel, which is fantastic to watch dramatically.
I'm afraid we're going to have to end it there before our last question, because we're going to invite Katrina Foster do you want to have the last question? Do we have time for the last question? Yes, let's have the last question, and then we're going to invite Katrina back to perform. What advice would you give to writers wanting to approach companies with their work? How do you cut through and get their attention?
I don't know. That is really the sad thing, is I'm not sure. I think that you have to have a bit of gumption. I think you have to find out the email address of the literary manager of the company, and you just hound them. You turn up, you come to the company, you say, I want to have a meeting with you, and you don't just send the script so that it sits on a pile of scripts. And the thing is, the great thing about Australia is generally you can find access to people, I've done that myself. I've been in London and called the Royal Court and said, I want to come and have a chat with you. And the Royal Court are completely not interested in my plays but they were like, oh my God, yeah, we know your work, and yeah, we'd love to come and have a chat with you. And I had a wonderful meeting with them, but that was after, I had a lot of success. I was still making those attempts to bridge divides. And the other thing is, as Frank Morehouse, a great Australian writer, always used to say, is, always go to the party. That is, nothing will happen if you don't go to the party. But if you go to the party, nothing might happen, but something might happen. You might just meet that person who sleeps with the literary manager of these theatre companies.
Joanna Murray-Smith, thank you so much, and chukas for tonight.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming.
Now, Katrina Foster is going to come and perform some more of Julia for us. Are we going to? Do you want us to sit here while?
Yeah.
Yes, fantastic, and enjoy Katrina's performance.
Or if you want to come move to the...
Okay, oh dear. All right. Yet who would have thought the old man to have so much blood in him? Kevin's out, I'm in. If any male politician wins a leadership spill, it's all part of the cut and thrust of politics. When it's a woman, she's Lady Macbeth. Many suggest she has blood on her hands. Murdoch. They see me, eyes ablaze, a psychopathic stare, my hands clasping his neck, blocking the carotid arteries and the jugular so his deoxygenated blood can't exit the brain. His eyes are bulging with the awareness that he is taking his final breath, a cloud of red shimmering in front of him, limbs jerking as my neatly manicured fingers press on his blood vessels until he drops lifeless to the floor. Deed done. I calmly lift one polished navy pump off the carpet tile and crush his spectacles underfoot, splintering the glass because, well, he won't be needing them again. The king is dead. Long live the queen. In truth, no psychopathic stare, no Shakespearean overtures or asphyxiation, just another moment in politics where one single element proves paramount: timing. It's timing that invites pragmatism, opportunism, and destiny into the room. Come on in, make yourselves at home. The roof of Parliament House encloses every variation of the human instinct to exploit the moment. Traitorous acts, grinning duplicity, the tidy compartmentalisation of morals. They will happen when the moment presents itself. And yes, in politics, we will kill if the timing is right. But we're no Macbeth. Macbeth felt regret. I won't regret anything that clears the way. Not now, not yet. I will not. Our only regrets are for the moments we display frailty, naivety, tenderness, love even. The distracted moments when we forget the mission, the only mission, the mission above all else, the mission to survive. Because in politics, we never regret anything that works. I didn't need to kill Kevin. Kevin's death was suicide by ego. But, so you know, if we must dip our oars in blood as we sail into the future, swish through its viscous crimson tide to get where we must go, we will do so. We will steer that vessel, blood dripping from its hull, beach it, and delete the voyage from memory.